installment of a book I've written, Sir, We Found Your Dog, The Life Story of Trent Stephen Schmidt. In his own words, written January the 11th, 2011. Where do you start a story like this? Currently? In a bar like so many others? Jumping back and forth from the far past to the recent past? Or somewhere in between? Jumping from the past to the future, which is really the past at the time of the reading? The problem is the story is ongoing, and the present would be a nice place to start, because by the time the story is finished, the present would be the past, and by adding the future, which will be the present or the recent past, will only add to the confusion of the reader, which seems to be a quality of good literature these days. So, imagine yourself like the narrator in the ancient city of Reims, a dreary January day, about 9.5 Celsius, making it easy to go outside without a coat, long enough for a cigarette. Because by this time there is no smoking indoors anymore, especially for a boy from the Midwest. I'm sipping on Jameson, listening to an iPod. Jesus, what have we come to? I'm speaking of the iPod, not the Jameson. And off and on watching snooker. How does a boy from the Midwest learn the fine arts of snooker? Part 1, Chapter 1, Trent's Induction. The place I've chosen to begin is with the account of Trent's enlistment in the Army. It was a pivotal moment in his life. He had worked for several months secretly exploring, researching, and studying the possibility of entering the armed forces to keep a pact made with his older brother Todd to serve together in the military. He did this surreptitiously because he was engaged in a totally different career. He was a senior pastor leading a medium-sized Christian congregation and didn't wish to alarm or to alert his parents or the congregants. As with most everything else in his life, he was very intense and thorough. When he finally decided and committed himself to pursue the cause, it precipitated an emotional earthquake. The church, which had been the place he was born and raised, which he now led as senior pastor and which had fallen in love with his ministry, was devastated. The only way I know to convey the feeling is to liken it to the sudden loss of a parent. There is shock and an inner trembling of uncertainty as to what are we going to do now? Who's going to lead us? Who's going to care for us? Who's going to be there when we need him? I recall the relentless searching of myself for any reason or cause I may have given him to take such a stunning change of direction. On one occasion, I knelt before him, weeping almost uncontrollably, telling him I was sorry for anything I had said or done to precipitate this, and I begged him to reconsider. He gazed at me in a kindly manner, with a sort of a sad compassion, but he was undeterred. Trent was in his early 30s, in excellent health and fitness, but he realized his window of opportunity was fast closing, and he must move with alacrity if he was going to fulfill a pact with his brother. Add to this fact, the Army was offering a significant bonus, and Trent wished to take advantage of those incentives. A quick ship would earn him a $20,000 bonus, something he found extremely attractive. Within days, accompanied by his recruiter, he was being sworn in at Fort Benjamin Harrison in Indianapolis with Mom and me, looking on and taking pictures. Basic training was at Fort Jackson, Columbia, South Carolina, and we were so proud of him at his graduation. Wendy, Todd, and I watched as his unit marched in parade ground before the commandant. Trent had been selected to carry the unit's guidon, and as each company stepped smartly past the reviewing stands, saluting the commander, I watched as Trent's face snapped sharply to the right as he strode resolutely forward. There was very little akin to the formal pageantry practiced by the military, with the band playing, with each unit marching by in lockstep toward their various destinies. Wendy, Todd, and I met up with Trent after formation broke and went to a local restaurant for sushi. We were trying to communicate and connect with our new soldier, but there was a strong sense of detachment from us. I suddenly realized that despite his age maturity and life experience, boot camp does break an individual down and reform him into the likeness of the Army. And it turned out that he was preoccupied with the need to get back to the barracks on time. Following our meal, we slowly drove back to his quarters, and I listened as Todd gave him some wise advice about some of the matters he was going to immediately encounter. As an example, Todd warned him about the hard-bitten old retired non-coms who would try to intimidate the newly minted soldiers to join some bank, insurance company, or other agency the old fart was representing. I was greatly impressed and thankful Trent had an older brother to give him tips and pointers about the new realities of military life, as Mother saw it. Trent went to basic training in August. However, I knew something was brewing on one of his back burners, so to speak, a month earlier. In June, Trent and I had joined up with friends of ours who pastored in Florida. Their church had a group deal for a cruise in the Caribbean, and we couldn't pass it up. It was during this cruise I became aware of something was keeping him somewhat preoccupied in buying minutes for his computer. The cruise was wonderful, but little did I know it would be the last mother-son trip we would take over the years. It was hard for me to put into words the bond Trent and I had developed. There were so many traditions we had. For example, every summer we'd alternate and one of us would treat the other to an Atlanta Braves game somewhere. I remember an incident that occurred at one of these games. Trent was wearing an authentic team jersey when a rowdy young child behind us spilled his slushy down Trent's back. Thank God the Braves won. Not long after we returned home from the cruise, Trent became sullen and withdrawn. Something was agitating him, and we were soon to find out. On a sultry July evening, Trent came over to our home, saying he needed to talk to us. As we each took our seats in the formal living room, he dropped the bomb of his resignation from the church and his decision to join the Army. My world collapsed and would never be rebuilt. In my shock, I recalled saying, "I'll take care of your dog Jackson for you." What I really felt and really wanted to say didn't come out. I went to my bedroom, laid across my bed, and cried for a long time. At one point, I could feel Trent's presence, but he didn't say anything, leaving quietly. From the day of his declaration until he left for basic training, everything was the last. The last Persian meal, the last day in his house, his last Sunday as pastor. Camelot for me was ending. My son would never be home. My busy life was a blessing as the days after he left. I do recall standing in line at the airport as long as I could and trying to memorize all the feature of his arms, his hands, his face. I didn't want to forget one small freckle. It was time for school to start, and I got caught up with the decorations, lesson plans, and having supplies ready. Trent did come out to my classroom before he left and put up the row of presidents for me. However, I only was reminded of him and how far away he was going to be every time I looked at them a lot. Before I knew it, Trent had finished basic training, part of his Army commitment. In his own words, "Mom, I have come to the end of basic training, BCT. It seems like longer, but it has only been a few short months since I made the decision to leave the ministry and join the Army. I have had a lot of time to ponder this decision, and believe me, I'm certainly pondered it during the scuff sessions, our road marches, and the cold nights in the field. One thing became clear to me, not perfectly clear, but more clear, was the disappointment you and Dad felt when I made this decision. I wonder if each time new clarity comes, I will feel like asking your forgiveness over and over again, as I do now. I know it must be difficult moments when you ask yourself, how could he have done this to us? At those times, imagine me right there asking your forgiveness. It would be nice to think this training has not changed me, but I am too realistic to believe that. While I am sure I have changed, I don't know if it is for the better, though I'd like to think so. I believe there is a reason for everything, and God has a hand in all of this. It may not be fully clear, but I believe it. I have been attending the weekly Protestant church services and doing as well as I can to keep up with my Bible reading. About 30 people were baptized on Sunday, November the 25th. I could not think of a better way to celebrate my birthday. I encourage you to look for Sir, We Found Your Dog on Amazon.